Chapter 6. The South Pole. On March the 14th, I saw ice floating in the sea. The further south we went, the more ice we saw, and it became thicker and thicker. 2 days later, the sea had frozen into an ice field, but the Nautilus was strong and broke the ice as it sailed through. However, the next day, the Nautilus got completely stuck. "It's the Ice Bank," said Ned Land, and we could see ice mountains in the distance. "No one can pass the Ice Bank," he said. "All there is behind the ice is ice, ice, ice." I went up to the platform to have a look. The captain was there and said, "Well, Professor, what do you think of it?" "I think we are stuck, Captain." "Where are we going?" "To the South Pole," he answered. "But we can't get through the Ice Bank," I cried. "That's true, but we can go under it. Once we get under the Ice Bank, we will get to the sea at the South Pole." Preparations were made to go under the Ice Bank, and at 4 o'clock the captain told me that everything was ready. The Nautilus went under the sea. It went down and down, and through the glass window we saw the Ice Bank disappear. I couldn't believe that we could get so low, but it was true. We were travelling under the Ice Bank. The next day, I went back to the museum room and watched as we slowly started to go back to the surface. The Ice Bank became thinner and thinner, and suddenly we broke through the thin ice and out into the open sea. I went up to the platform on top of the submarine. I saw many different kinds of birds, and the sea was full of fish. It felt like spring. "Are we at the South Pole, Captain?" I asked excitedly. "I don't know," he replied. "I must do some calculations." We got into the small boat and rowed to the shore, got out, and walked to the top of a mountain. At the top, the captain measured the position of the sun in the sky. He did some calculations and smiled. "I, Captain Nemo, on March the 19th, 1868, have reached the South Pole," he said proudly. Then he stuck a large black flag with the letter N written on it into the ground. We were the first people to get to the South Pole. The next morning, we left the South Pole and travelled under the Ice Bank again. We had travelled 14,000 leagues, and I had seen many interesting things. I went to sleep that night dreaming of all the places we had been to. Suddenly, I woke up with a shock. The Nautilus was lying on its side. I went to the museum room and met Conseil, Ned Land and Captain Nemo. "We have had an accident," he said seriously. "An enormous block of ice turned over, and we are stuck on the ice. It is pushing us upwards. If the block of ice doesn't stop, we might be crushed against the Ice Bank." For the next 5 minutes, the whole ship was in a state of deep horror. Was the block going to stop? We looked out of the window and could see the Ice Bank above us. We were sure that this was the end. But suddenly, we all fell forward as the enormous block of ice stopped. I looked out of the window and saw the Ice Bank right above us. "Wow, that was close," I said. "Another 30 meters and we would have been crushed against the Ice Bank." Ice was on both sides of the submarine, and all that we could see was a huge wall of ice. Above us was the Ice Bank. Below us was the enormous block of ice. We were in a tunnel of ice. The only way to get out was to go forwards or backwards until we found a way out. The captain started the engines, and the Nautilus moved forwards through the ice tunnel. A minute later, it hit ice. The tunnel was blocked. So the captain started to go backwards through the tunnel. It moved through the tunnel for about 25 minutes and then hit the ice again. Ned Land and Conseil looked worried. "What's happening?" shouted Ned Land. "Where is the captain? We must find out what's going on." The door opened and Captain Nemo came in. For a moment he didn't speak. "We have a problem," he said seriously. "We are stuck in this tunnel of ice. Above us there is the Ice Bank. Below us there is the block of ice. Both forwards and backwards are blocked. "What are we going to do?" cried Ned Land. "I don't know," replied the captain. "We are trapped. There are two ways we might die. The first is to be crushed to death by the ice. The second is to suffocate, as we don't have very much air. The air tanks will only give us 2 days of air. But we can put on our diving suits and start digging the ice." The ice was about 10 meters thick, and about 12 sailors from the Nautilus went out to dig the ice. Ned Land, Conseil, and myself went with them. After 12 hours of work, we had only dug a small part of the ice. It was taking a long time to dig through the ice, and we didn't have much air left. The next day, we continued digging the ice, and we dug about 6 meters of ice. The air inside the submarine wasn't very good, and I got a serious headache. By the next day, there were only 2 meters left to dig. I lay down on my bed. I had no strength. My head and my lungs were hurting, and it was difficult to walk, as there was almost no air left. Everyone was desperate. Later that evening, Captain Nemo decided he would try to use the submarine to break through the ice beneath us. All the sailors came back into the Nautilus, and the tanks were filled with water to make the submarine heavier. The captain started the engine. The Nautilus started to push down against the ice. It was pushing and pushing, when suddenly we heard a loud cracking noise. The ice below us broke and the submarine was free. But we were still under the ice bank and had no air, but we travelled as fast as we could towards the open sea. I was lying on a sofa in the library. My face was purple and my lips were blue. I couldn't move, and when I opened my eyes, I couldn't see. I don't know how long this lasted, but I knew I was dying. How long would it take to get to the sea, I thought. Hours and hours went by, and the Nautilus was still travelling as fast as it could. Suddenly, I felt pure air in the submarine. I breathed and stood up. It was still difficult to walk, but I climbed up onto the platform and breathed in the fresh sea air. Slowly my strength came back to me. Ned Land, Conseil, and Captain Nemo were all on the platform, and we thanked God we were still alive.